April 7th, 1945, 1300 hours, 200 miles southwest of Kyushu, Japan. Vice Admiral Seiichi Ito stands on the bridge of battleship Yamato, the largest, most heavily armored battleship ever constructed, 72,800 tons at full load, 9 18-inch guns, the most powerful naval artillery in existence, armor up to 16 inches thick on the main belt, 21 inches on the turret faces. This ship was designed to be unsinkable, to dominate any battle, to survive anything the enemy could throw at it. And Ito commands her on what everyone aboard knows is a suicide mission. Operation 10 Go, a one-way voyage to Okinawa, where American invasion forces are landing. The plan is simple. Reach Okinawa, beach the Yamato, use her guns as floating fortress, fight until the ammunition runs out, then the crew will abandon ship and fight on land as infantry. No one expects to survive, but the mission will demonstrate Japanese fighting spirit, will show that Japan will never surrender. Ito is 57 years old, from Fukuoka, career naval officer. He knows this mission is futile. He protested the orders, told Combined Fleet Headquarters that sending Yamato without air cover against American carrier forces is suicide, that the battleship will be sunk long before reaching Okinawa. And the response was, "This is the Emperor's will. You will comply." So Ito complied. And now, 1400 hours on April 7th, his worst fears are being realized. American aircraft have found them, the radar operators report. Many aircraft approaching from multiple directions, over 300. And Ito knows Yamato is about to face the attack she was never designed to withstand. Not battleship guns firing from 20 miles away. Not torpedoes from submarines that can be evaded, but dive bombers and torpedo bombers, hundreds of them, attacking from all directions, simultaneously, and there is nothing he can do except order the anti-aircraft crews to fire and pray. The first wave attacks at 1330 hours. Grumman TBF Avenger torpedo bombers, Curtiss SB-2C Helldiver dive bombers, Vought F-4U Corsairs carrying bombs. They come in low, high, from all directions, and the sky fills with anti-aircraft fire. Yamato's 24 5-inch guns, 162 25mm anti-aircraft guns, all firing. The noise is deafening, the smoke is blinding, and the aircraft keep coming. Torpedoes hit the port side, 1, 2, 3. The massive ship shudders, but the armor holds. The damage control teams report flooding, contained, manageable. And Ito thinks, we can survive this. The armor works, and then the dive bombers arrive, and everything changes. Because dive bombers do not attack the armor belt, they attack from above, where the deck armor is thinner, and bombs falling nearly vertically penetrate into the machinery spaces, into ammunition magazines, into crew compartments. And Yamato, designed to withstand horizontal gunfire, cannot withstand vertical bombing. The first bomb hits amidships, penetrates, explodes inside, killing dozens, starting fires, and more bombs are coming. And Ito realizes the Americans are not trying to sink Yamato with torpedoes. They are destroying her from above, with dive bombers, the weapon Japanese commanders had dismissed as ineffective against heavy armor. And in 2 hours, the unsinkable battleship Yamato will be at the bottom of the East China Sea. And Ito will be dead, along with 3,055 of his crew, killed by the weapon Japan underestimated. This attack, April 7th, 1945, represents the final vindication of American dive bombing doctrine. The moment when the weapon Japanese naval officers had mocked as inadequate against battleship armor proved decisive. When the largest, most heavily protected warship ever built was destroyed not by enemy battleships, but by carrier aircraft. And when Japanese assumptions about naval warfare, built on decades of battleship-centric thinking, were proven catastrophically wrong. This is the story of how American dive bombers evolved from being dismissed by Japanese commanders as nuisance weapons to becoming the primary ship-killing arm of the US Navy. How Japanese confidence in battleship invulnerability was shattered at Midway, at Philippine Sea, and finally at Yamato's sinking, and how one class of aircraft, the dive bomber, proved that in modern naval warfare, aircraft carriers matter more than battleships. The mocking ended at Midway. The lesson was confirmed at Philippine Sea, and the final proof came when Yamato, the ultimate expression of battleship power, sank beneath waves created by American dive bombers that Japanese commanders had once considered irrelevant. Vice Admiral Seiichi Ito was real. He commanded the Yamato's final mission and went down with his ship on April 7, 1945. His objections to Operation Tengo are documented in Japanese naval records and post-war testimonies from surviving staff officers. According to statements from Captain Tameichi Hara, who survived the war and wrote the memoir Japanese Destroyer Captain, Ito told his staff before the mission, "We are being sent to die. This is not a military operation. This is a suicide gesture. Yamato will not reach Okinawa. American carrier aircraft will find us and sink us, and 3,000 men will die for nothing. But orders are orders, and we will obey." Hara's account was corroborated by other survivors and by records from combined fleet headquarters captured after Japan's surrender. The Japanese Imperial Navy's faith in battleships was absolute. Since the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905, when battleship gunnery at Tsushima destroyed the Russian Baltic Fleet, Japan had built its doctrine around decisive fleet engagement, battleships meeting in gun duels that would determine naval supremacy. This philosophy shaped Japanese naval construction for 40 years, culminating in the Yamato class. Yamato and her sister ship, Musashi, were the embodiment of battleship supremacy doctrine. They mounted 9 18.1-inch guns. Each shell weighed 3,200 pounds, could be fired to a range of 45,000 yards, and could penetrate any armor afloat. The ship's armor was designed to withstand 18-inch gunfire at battle ranges, main belt 16.1 inches thick, turret faces 25.6 inches, and deck armor 9.1 inches over magazines, 7.9 inches over machinery. But this armor scheme had a weakness. It was optimized against horizontal fire, against shells fired from distant battleships, approaching at shallow angles. The deck armor, while thick, was not designed to withstand bombs falling from high altitude at near vertical angles. Japanese naval architects knew this, but they calculated that aircraft bombs were too small to be a serious threat. A 1,000-pound bomb, even if it penetrated deck armor, would cause localized damage, not catastrophic flooding or magazine explosions. This calculation was based on the bomb technology of the 1930s, and it would prove fatally flawed. The American Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bomber entered service in 1941. Maximum bomb load, 1,600 pounds, typically carried as one 1,000-pound bomb under the fuselage and two 100-pound bombs under the wings. The Dauntless's innovation was not the bomb size, it was the delivery method. The aircraft could dive at angles up to 70 degrees, reaching speeds of 250 miles per hour in the dive, and release bombs from as low as 1,500 feet. This gave extraordinary accuracy. Experienced pilots could put bombs within 50 feet of aim point against a moving ship, and the steep dive angle meant bombs impacted at nearly vertical angles, maximum penetration through deck armor. Japanese observation of early dive bombing attacks in China and Southeast Asia led to dismissive assessments. Captain Tamaichi Hara, in his memoir, described the prevailing Japanese Navy view in 1941. We considered dive bombers to be tactical weapons, useful against destroyers and smaller vessels, but ineffective against capital ships. The bombs were too small, the armor was too thick. Yes, a lucky hit might cause damage, but nothing that would sink a battleship or even disable it seriously. Our doctrine said dive bombers were a nuisance. Torpedo bombers were the real threat, because torpedoes hit below the waterline, where armor was weaker and could cause flooding impossible to control. This assessment seemed logical, and it was shared throughout the fleet. The Battle of the Coral Sea in May 1942 gave the first indication this assessment was wrong. American SBD Dauntless dive bombers attacked the Japanese carrier Shikaku. Multiple bombs penetrated the flight deck, started fires, destroyed aircraft, and put the carrier out of action for months. But Shikaku survived, was towed back to Japan, repaired, and this reinforced Japanese beliefs. Dive bombers could damage carriers, but not sink them, not quickly. The real threat remained torpedoes, which had sunk the carrier Shoho at Coral Sea while bombs had only damaged Shikaku. The Battle of Midway shattered this complacency. June 4th, 1942. 4 Japanese fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, were attacked by American dive bombers. Within minutes, 3 carriers were burning. Dive bombers had caught them with aircraft on deck being refueled and rearmed. Bombs penetrated flight decks, ignited fuel and munitions, and started fires that could not be controlled. All 3 carriers sank. A 4th, Hiryu, was hit later and also sank. 4 fleet carriers lost. Japan's primary striking power destroyed by dive bombers. The weapon Japanese commanders had dismissed as ineffective against capital ships. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, who led the Pearl Harbor attack and survived Midway despite being wounded aboard Akagi, described the shock in his post-war memoir, Midway, the Battle That Doomed Japan, co-written with Masatake Okumiya. Fuchida wrote, "We had prepared for torpedo attack, had stationed our combat air patrol at low altitude to intercept torpedo bombers. When American dive bombers appeared at high altitude, they were unopposed. Our fighters were below. Our anti-aircraft fire was focused on the wrong altitude, and in 5 minutes, our 3 carriers were doomed. This was not bad luck. This was fundamental misunderstanding of dive bomber threat. We had calculated that bombs could not sink carriers. We were wrong. Bombs could not sink carriers through armor penetration alone, but they could destroy carriers by causing uncontrollable fires when ships were vulnerable. And at Midway, all 4 carriers were vulnerable, caught with aircraft being armed, fuel lines open, ordnance exposed. 1 bomb under those conditions was enough to start fires that doomed the ship." Post-Midway, Japanese naval doctrine attempted to adapt, recognized that dive bombers were more dangerous than previously assessed. But the adaptation was incomplete. Japanese commanders still believed that proper air cover and alert anti-aircraft defenses could negate dive bomber threat. That Midway was an aberration, caused by surprise and poor fighter coordination, not by inherent dive bomber effectiveness. This belief would cost Japan dearly in subsequent battles. The Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944 demonstrated American dive bombing effectiveness against a prepared enemy. Japanese carriers had combat air patrol, had warning of attacks, had time to prepare, and American dive bombers still got through. The carrier Hyo was hit by torpedo and bomb attacks, sank in less than an hour. The carrier Taiho, newest and most heavily armored Japanese carrier, was hit by one submarine torpedo and damaged by near-miss bombs. Poor damage control led to aviation fuel vapor spreading through the ship. When it ignited, the resulting explosion and fires sank the carrier. 2 carriers lost, one primarily to bombs, and Japanese losses in aircraft were catastrophic. Over 600 aircraft shot down, most by fighters. But the carrier losses were to bombs and torpedoes, and Japanese commanders could no longer deny. American carrier aircraft were devastating against Japanese ships, even when those ships had warning and were defended. Rear Admiral Sueo Obayashi, commander of Carrier Division 3 at Philippine Sea, survived the battle. In post-war interrogation by U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, Obayashi stated, "American attack coordination was superior to our capabilities. Their dive bombers and torpedo bombers attacked simultaneously from multiple directions. Our anti-aircraft fire could not engage all threats. Our fighters could not intercept all attackers, and their bombs were larger and more destructive than we expected. We had been briefed that American bombs were inferior to Japanese weapons. This was false. Their 1,000-pound bombs penetrated our flight decks easily and caused fires we could not control. By 1944, we recognized dive bombers as primary threat, but we lacked means to counter them effectively." The evolution of American dive bomber doctrine paralleled aircraft development. The SBD Dauntless, while effective, was being replaced by the Curtiss SB-2C Helldiver by late 1943. The Helldiver carried larger bomb loads, up to 2,000 pounds, had better armor protection, and could dive faster. Its arrival coincided with improved bomb technology. The 1,600-pound AN-M66 armor-piercing bomb could penetrate over 4 inches of steel. The semi-armor piercing bombs used earlier could not reliably penetrate heavy deck armor. The new AP bombs could, and they had delayed action fuses, allowing penetration through multiple decks before detonation. Maximizing internal damage, American dive bomber pilots developed tactics optimized for attacking heavily defended ships. Attack from multiple directions simultaneously. Overwhelmed defensive fire. Some aircraft attacked from steep angles, others from shallower angles, making anti-aircraft tracking difficult, and coordination with torpedo bombers meant defenders had to split attention between high-altitude dive bombers and low-altitude torpedo attacks. This was called hammer and anvil, and it worked because ships could not effectively defend against attacks from multiple altitudes and directions simultaneously. Japanese battleship Musashi, Yamato's sister ship, was sunk by this tactic at the Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944. Over 300 aircraft from multiple American carrier groups attacked in waves. 19 torpedo hits, 17 bomb hits, over 5 hours. Musashi capsized and sank, taking over 1,000 crew with her. Post-battle analysis of the attack profile showed that bombs caused as much damage as torpedoes. Multiple bomb hits penetrated deck armor, destroyed machinery, started fires, and the combination of torpedo flooding and bomb damage overwhelmed damage control capabilities. The ship designed to survive battleship gunfire could not survive concentrated air attack. The lesson was clear, but Japan had no effective response. Japanese carrier aviation had been destroyed at Philippine Sea. Remaining carriers lacked trained pilots and aircraft. Japanese land-based air power could not contest American carrier task forces, and Japanese surface fleet, without air cover, was vulnerable to air attack it could not survive. This reality led to Operation 10 Go, the suicide mission of Yamato. Because Japan had no other options, the battleship would sail to Okinawa, fight until destroyed, and demonstrate fighting spirit even in defeat. This was not military strategy. This was ritual suicide, applied to a battleship. The decision to send Yamato was controversial within Japanese naval command. Several admirals protested, including Vice Admiral Seiichi Aito, who was assigned to command the mission. According to post-war testimony from Captain Atsushi Oi, a surviving staff officer, Ito argued to Admiral Soemu Toyoda, Commander-in-Chief of Combined Fleet, "This mission has no military value. Yamato will be sunk by American carrier aircraft long before reaching Okinawa. The ship lacks air cover. The route is known to the Americans, and 3,000 men will die achieving nothing. If we must expend Yamato's crew, use them to defend Japan. Do not waste them on a gesture." Toyoda's response, according to Oi, was, "The decision has been made. The Emperor approves. Your duty is to obey. The sacrifice of Yamato will inspire the nation to resist. That is the mission's value." And Ito, as a Japanese naval officer, obeyed. Yamato departed Tokuyama on April 6, 1945, accompanied by light cruiser Yahagi and 8 destroyers. Fuel was limited, enough for one-way voyage to Okinawa. No expectation of return. The force was detected by the American submarines shortly after departure. Position and course were reported, and American carrier task forces off Okinawa prepared. Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher, commanding Task Force 58, had 11 fleet carriers and 6 light carriers available. Over 1,000 aircraft. The decision to attack was immediate. This was an opportunity to sink the largest battleship afloat and eliminate any threat it posed to the Okinawa invasion. The attack was launched morning of April 7th. 386 aircraft from 8 carriers. The strike force included 98 dive bombers, SB-2C Helldivers, each carrying 1,000-pound bombs, 131 torpedo bombers, TBF Avengers, each carrying a Mark 13 torpedo, and 157 fighters, F-6F Hellcats and F-4U Corsairs, some carrying bombs. The force was divided into waves to maintain continuous pressure and ensure Yamato could not escape between attacks. The Japanese force had no air cover. Japanese land-based aircraft were ordered to provide protection, but did not appear, either because they could not locate Yamato, or because they were intercepted by American fighters. Either way, Yamato fought alone, against nearly 400 aircraft, with only anti-aircraft guns for defense. The outcome was predetermined. The first attack wave arrived at 12:30 hours, coordinated assault from multiple directions, torpedo bombers from port and starboard, dive bombers from high altitude, and fighters strafing to suppress anti-aircraft fire. Yamato maneuvered radically, attempting to evade torpedoes, but torpedoes came from both sides. At least 2 hit port side, 1 hit starboard. The ship developed a list, and damage control teams flooded compartments on the opposite side to correct list. Standard procedure, but this reduced reserve buoyancy, made the ship more vulnerable to subsequent flooding. The second wave attacked at 1300 hours. More torpedoes, more bombs, and the cumulative damage was telling. Steering was damaged, speed was reduced, list increased, and fires were burning throughout the ship. The third wave arrived at 13:30 hours, and this was the decisive attack. Multiple bombs penetrated deck armor amidships. 1 hit near the base of the forward smokestack, penetrated, exploded in the engine room, destroying machinery. Another hit aft, near the steering gear, and multiple torpedo hits on the port side increased flooding beyond control capacity. The ship was doomed. At 1400 hours, Yamato's list exceeded 30 degrees. Water was pouring through damaged compartments. Power was failing, and Admiral Ito ordered abandoned ship. But it was too late. At 14:23 hours, the list reached 90 degrees. The ship rolled over, and the aft magazines exploded. The explosion was visible from 60 miles away, a mushroom cloud rising thousands of feet, and when it cleared, Yamato was gone. 3,055 men died, including Admiral Ito. Only 280 survived. Picked up by escorting destroyers, American losses were 10 aircraft, 3 to anti-aircraft fire, 7 to operational accidents, 12 aircrew killed. This was the exchange ratio: 3,000 Japanese sailors for 12 American airmen, and the destruction of the largest battleship ever built. For the loss of 10 aircraft, this was the vindication of carrier aviation, the proof that battleships, no matter how heavily armoured, could not survive determined air attack, and the final demonstration that dive bombers, the weapon Japanese commanders had mocked, were the most effective ship-killing weapon in modern naval warfare. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, the most senior Japanese naval aviator to survive the war, analysed Yamato's sinking in his post-war writings. According to his assessment published in U.S. Naval Institute Proceedings in 1952, Yamato's loss confirmed what we had learned at Midway and Philippine Sea. Battleships cannot survive concentrated air attack without air cover. No amount of armour can protect against multiple bomb and torpedo hits. The Americans had perfected dive bombing tactics to the point where accuracy was assured, and they had bomb technology that could penetrate heavy deck armour. Combined with torpedo attacks, this created overwhelming offensive capability that no ship could survive. Japan's faith in battleship supremacy was misplaced. We built Yamato to fight enemy battleships, but we never fought enemy battleships. We fought enemy aircraft, and Yamato's armour was optimized for the wrong threat. The technical analysis supports this assessment. Yamato was hit by an estimated 11 torpedoes and 6 bombs. The torpedoes caused flooding that progressively reduced stability. The bombs caused internal damage and fires, and the combination overwhelmed damage control. But the critical insight is that the bombs were as important as the torpedoes, because bombs destroyed the ship's ability to control flooding, knocked out pumps, destroyed electrical systems, killed damage control crews, and prevented effective response to torpedo damage. Without bombs, the torpedo hits might have been survivable. Without torpedoes, the bomb damage might have been survivable. Together, they were fatal. The doctrine that emerged from this battle shaped post-war naval thinking. Battleships were obsolete as primary striking weapons. Carriers were the new capital ships, and dive bombers and torpedo bombers were the primary ship-killing weapons. The US Navy maintained battleships for shore bombardment and anti-aircraft defense, but never again considered them primary fleet elements. Japan had learned this lesson in blood. America had proven it through victory. And modern naval warfare was redefined, not by surface gunnery, but by aircraft carrier aviation. Ensign Thomas Stetson, VBF-9 from carrier Yorktown, participated in the attack on Yamato. His after-action report, preserved in National Archives, described the final moments. Target was maneuvering radically when we arrived, already listing heavily to port from previous attacks. We made our runs from starboard side, diving through intense anti-aircraft fire. I released at 2,000 feet, saw bomb impact near forward turret, large explosion and fire. Ship was burning in multiple locations. As we departed, she was rolling over. List exceeded 80 degrees, and then she exploded. Largest explosion I witnessed during the war. Our radio operator said he felt the blast wave from 5 miles away. When smoke cleared, nothing remained. The battleship had simply ceased to exist. The Japanese survivors told similar stories. Petty Officer Yoshida Mitsuru survived the sinking and wrote a memoir, Requiem for Battleship Yamato, published in Japanese in 1952. His account described the helplessness aboard ship as bombs penetrated deck after deck. We could hear explosions above us, feel the ship shudder, smell the smoke, but we could not see the aircraft, could not fight back. We were trapped below decks, waiting to die. When the order to abandon ship came, the list was so severe that many could not escape. Water was pouring through damaged hatches, and the ship rolled so quickly that hundreds were trapped inside. I survived by luck, by being near an exit when the roll began. Many of my friends died because they were seconds too slow, or in the wrong compartment. This was not battle. This was execution. The strategic consequences of Yamato's sinking extended beyond the immediate loss. Japan had committed its last major surface combatant to a suicide mission, and lost it achieving nothing. No American ships were damaged. The Okinawa invasion proceeded unhindered, and Japanese naval power, already reduced to insignificance, was eliminated completely. The only remaining Japanese naval assets were submarines and small craft, neither capable of affecting the war's outcome. Japan had lost the naval war, not through defeat in surface combat, but through inability to defend against air attack, and the weapon that delivered this defeat was dive bombers. The aircraft Japanese commanders had mocked in 1941 as ineffective against heavy armor. The legacy of American dive bomber doctrine endured through the Cold War. Though dive bombing was eventually replaced by precision-guided munitions, the core principle remained: attack from altitude, penetrate armor vertically, maximize internal damage. Modern anti-ship missiles follow the same logic: terminal dive profiles, armor-piercing warheads, vertical attack angles. The dive bomber's descendant is the cruise missile, and the doctrine born at Midway and perfected at Yamato's sinking shapes naval warfare to this day. The mocking ended June 4th, 1942, at Midway, when dive bombers sank 4 fleet carriers in minutes. The lesson was reinforced at Philippine Sea, when American dive bombers destroyed Japanese aviation, and the final proof came April 7th, 1945. When the Yamato, symbol of battleship supremacy, sank beneath the waves, destroyed by the weapon Japan had dismissed, by dive bombers that Japanese commanders had considered nuisance weapons, by American carrier aviation that had learned, adapted, and perfected ship-killing tactics that no amount of armor could defeat. Vice Admiral Ito died with his ship, as Japanese tradition demanded. But his death proved nothing except that courage cannot overcome obsolete doctrine, that fighting spirit cannot substitute for technological adaptation, and that the nation which dismisses enemy weapons as ineffective does so at its peril. Japan dismissed dive bombers and paid with its navy. America perfected dive bombing and ruled the Pacific. The lesson was written in steel at the bottom of the East China Sea, where Yamato rests, destroyed by the weapon Japan underestimated until it was too late.